Welcome to another Houston Apartment Association Expert Exchange, where we address real questions with expert answers. My name is Morgan Taylor, and I am the editor of Abode Magazine. I will be moderating the session today. Our host, however, is HAA Vice President at Large, Tracy Yoder with Barvin. Today is Wednesday, July 21st. And we are interviewing Robert Cote with Higher Priority Staffing and Executive Search on hiring in a staffing shortage. Before we get started, I'm going to review some housekeeping items. This series is designed to offer quick 30-minute sessions, but we will stay on as long as necessary to answer all of your questions. You may ask your questions in the Zoom chat box. And if you can't stay on for long, you can always find this session and previous sessions on our YouTube channel, HAA TV, and it will get uploaded later today. Once we answer all the questions we curated, we will get to your questions. A quick disclaimer: we are not public health experts nor attorneys. This webinar is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. No member should act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to your situation. Please consult with your management company or property owner to address specific issues and to form your own company guidelines. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Tracy.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. Hi, everybody. And thank you for joining us today and taking valuable time out of your busy days to join this on our very important topic today. We're super excited to have our staffing expert, Robert Cote, with Higher Priority Staffing and Executive Search. And Robert, let me just start off with introducing everybody and giving some information about your bio. I know you've been the Chief Operating Officer at Higher Priority Staffing and Executive Search with over 20 years staffing and search experience and over 15 years of executive oversight. Higher Priority, founded in Houston, has been a leader in multifamily job placement since 1990, providing temporary, temp to hire, payroll hire, permanent placement, training, and career coaching. So thanks for joining us today, Ryan.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here, and thank you everybody for joining me on my TED Talk today.
Well, and I just said Ryan, and it's Robert. So shame on me, Robert. So I got so excited. I already got to the first question. So, but I do want to kind of give a summary to everybody as far as, as Morgan mentioned, this session is on hiring in a staffing shortage. And I know that, all of us, I know me personally speaking, and then on the management side, we're all experiencing these challenges. So the apartment industry isn't excluded from the long list of industries impacted by the staffing shortage. We just can't find quality employees, and people are leaving their companies left and right, oftentimes without even giving any type of notice. In this session, we'll talk about what is going on and, more importantly, what we can do about it. At the end of the session, we will answer any questions that you may have specific to your particular situation within your company or your site. So Robert, we're going to just jump right into this, if you don't mind. So the first question, the apartment industry is struggling, obviously, to find quality job candidates. We aren't the only industry impacted by what seems to be a staffing shortage nationally. We can all guess this is the result of the pandemic. But we do rely on your expertise in your field as far as what your research reveals as it relates to the staffing shortage in our industry.
Yeah, so let me start with just a big wow, because our industry, in my opinion, like we should be a little bit immune to what's going on staffing wise right now, and we're not. And I think that there are a lot of reasons that contribute to that, but it is surprising to me because ours as an industry, in my opinion, offers some incredible opportunities for career path and career progression from entry level all the way up to executive, and with little barrier to rewarding careers in this industry. In other careers, education, certification, training are critical to elevate. Ours is an industry where, with hard work and with focus, you can really do well. But to get into kind of what's going on with the pandemic and its effect, I want to kind of create a context, if you will, and put a little preface in place. And in my work career, and I know I look young, but I've been a part of three major economic events, downturns, if you will. There was the 2001, 2002 event. The beginnings of it were the bursting of the dot-com bubble, and then it was precipitated and made more intense with the 9/11 attacks. And then in 2008 to 2010, another bubble burst. You might call it the mortgage lending bubble, but that housing bubble burst, and again, a specific event. And both of those were specific events in which we as a populace, as a workforce, I'll speak to our audience, employees who are currently working, and then those that we want to attract. In both of those situations, we kind of knew what happened, who was to blame, and what were you going to do about it. In 2002, after 9/11, the idea of freedom, the idea of a war on terror, that had a price that had to be paid. And so we're all going to get to work to pay that price. And so employees were eager. If they'd been displaced, they were eager to get back into the workforce. They were eager to be contributing to that greater purpose. Okay. And so they went to work. And also, it was a very localized event. Again, if you weren't really in high tech, there was a good chance that you may not have been economically displaced. And so there were plenty of opportunities there. 2008 was a little more severe, but after we kind of unwound everything, we kind of knew what happened. We knew who to blame: big banks, predatory lending, reckless borrowers, the whole ninja loan, no income, no job, but I can afford a $500,000 mansion on the beach, that kind of thing. And we poured money back into the system, and everybody was like, okay, there's a big bill to be paid. Let's get back to work and let's pay that bill. And workers, for the most part, they were thankful, they were grateful, and they were committed to the ideas of recovery. That's not what we're experiencing. And I'm not going to make any value judgments here about who's really to blame and what really will work in solving it and get us out of it. But I'm going to speak to the hysteria of the pandemic. And I use the word hysteria because I feel like emotionally out of control is kind of what is appropriate here. There's pretty wide agreement on where it started, Wuhan, China, and when it started, the fall of 2019. After that, there's no agreement, in my opinion, how to prevent it, how deadly and dangerous it is, how it got to America. Do we wear masks? Do we stay 6 feet away from each other? Do we get vaccinated? There's still ongoing arguments and debates. But what did happen was, what I would say is, over a fortnight, literally, there was a Friday news story in March of 2020. And by that following Friday, lockdowns everywhere. In that tight time frame, employers were forced to decide what to do that was right for them, and didn't even have time to necessarily figure out, are we doing it in the right way? And that created what I like to term, or I don't like, but what I choose to term, a trauma. The entire workforce is on one side or the other of this trauma. I don't want to say half, but a big group of employees were told, we can't afford you anymore right now. Maybe not ever again, but definitely right now. You're furloughed, you're laid off. And then another group was told, you're too essential to not come to work. And essential is a funny word, in my opinion, because it ties to useful. And useful, again, that has another meaning. And this is all, I wouldn't say conscious, I would say it's a little unconscious, but it has an emotional effect on the workforce, which is, so long as you serve the purposes of the organization, we're going to continue to use you. But we have not yet prioritized your health and well-being. And for those reasons, both populations, those who were employed through the pandemic and those who were displaced through the pandemic, experienced this trauma. And so what that has done is, in 2021, commitment to work, whether it be searching for work or keeping work, it's being evaluated in a much, much different way. It is being evaluated much more emotionally, as if, again, you think of the entire workforce as a person emerging from a trauma. And in a lot of ways, that trauma is still ongoing. So they're not making rational decisions. They may not even be empowered to make rational decisions. And if we as employers are going to succeed in this, we have to be mindful of that, and we have to adapt to that. And again, the way I would equate this economic upheaval to those other two I mentioned is they were events, specific, finite, and understandable. This is an atmosphere that persists even to this day. So I think that's where there's the difference in terms of employees wanting to return to work in the past, where we're not experiencing that presently.
Yeah, I think that's some great information, Robert, and a lot of things that I know I personally haven't thought of. But I think that the trauma is, although it's a hard word to hear, but I think it's very real. And it's the perception too that everybody that has had, and you mentioned too, being an essential employee versus non-essential employee. We, especially our on-site associates who are dealing with residents in their homes, immediately they're essential employees, right? Where then you have maybe some corporate, team members that don't necessarily have to come to the office every day. So there's even been, I've seen in our industry and with some of the companies I've been dealing with, even a separation from on-site associates to, corporate staffing. So I may want to touch on that a little bit later, but, out of curiosity, with it being so hard to, get people, out of that kind of trauma state and, come back to, to the workforce. Do you see, bonuses changing, sign-on bonuses, those types of incentives, increased now that we're trying to get some of these positions staffed?
Well, so there's what I would consider to be widespread initiative right now of let's dangle, what glitters and see what we can shake out. I personally, one, I haven't observed it being effective. And two, I don't think it is going to be a effective long term. And there's a couple of simple reasons. Let me give you the first. The audience we're recruiting from, for the most part, they just got several $1,000s over the last 16 months. And I'm not going to say for not doing anything, but it was made available to them. And so the idea that we might offer a sign-on bonus of $2,500, of $5,000, it doesn't really create enough differentiation between the stimulus money that they were getting for them to say, wow, that's worth it. So they're going to look at that sign-on bonus and they're going to say, for what? And then on top of that, an interesting thing happened over the course of the pandemic for the average worker, which was we didn't know when we were going to emerge. We didn't know what the economy would look like. We had this money coming in. And so discretionary spending finally was cut. Trips, restaurants, hotels, new iPads, things like that. People really got very conscientious about their money. And so on average, and I don't know that we fully exited the pandemic, but on average, the average worker left the pandemic with lower debt loads and more liquid opportunities, more cash in the bank. So again, dangling $2,500 isn't going to be enough. I think what's going to be enough is for you to be able to tell them in terms of your opportunity, why they would want to have that job. What's the meaningful nature of them in that role? I don't want to discredit it altogether. You have to be fair to market. So if your competitors, if the market at large is making money available, you don't want to be conspicuously absent from that. But if you're looking for differentiation where you can attract and retain at a higher rate, you're going to have to add to that. And that's for me where you're going to have to get into the what and the why. What we have available for you and why you'll be a meaningful part of this organization, a meaningful part of what we do with our customers. That's going to be more important. And it's something that you should visit with your current staff for retention purposes. And then be able to, I'm an entrepreneur. And so they used to tell me about the elevator speech. Hey, you got to be able in 30 seconds, your why needs to be clear in 30 seconds. Well, when we're hiring these workers now, We want to have the elevator speech about the open position and about the local organization as well as the global organization, so that within a couple of minutes, they can be enthusiastic about their piece of that why. And that's going to create differentiated results for you, in my opinion, a lot more effectively than the $2,500 or the $5,000 signing bonuses, which inadvertently could cause a loss of experienced employees, because as they see you hiring new people at higher bonus rates and they didn't get that same bonus themselves, they're going to see what's out there for them. And so while you're paying heavily to get people through the front door, you're losing great people out the back door if you're not careful.
Now those are some great points. And if I'm hearing you right, Robert, I mean, money obviously isn't everything. I mean, obviously, to your point earlier, you have to be fair and within market and be competitive. So, you mentioned several things that can motivate people to take their job, as far as, talking about their value and things of that nature. But any other kind of words of wisdom, if you will, as far as, during the recruiting process, if it's not all about money, if money's kind of fair game across the board, what we can do to help, recruit good people?
Yes, I think so. Number one, cast as wide a net as is appropriate, and don't be so rigid with regards to traditional standards of experience and education. Look for opportunities where an individual has transferable skills from another industry. Right now, retail, hospitality, hotel, restaurant, they're bleeding people left and right. And many of the skills for those individuals fit well with our customer service positions, our leasing, marketing positions, even assistant manager into community manager. And so be mindful of that. And then, once you get into the interview phase, so that you can have an effective interview with these candidates that you want to attract to your organization, I would say start with the check-in. How have the last 16 months been for you? What has been your experience? What are you looking for now? And get that dialogue to where you can create a clear and enthusiastic connection between that prospective employee's experience and what you have to offer, and be able to relate, again, that I call it the how and the why. Be able to relate the how and the why to, maybe a little bit of what they felt was lacking in either their last position or as they've endured over these last 16 months, and be able to connect with them in that real way. One of the ways that I failed my organization in the last 16 months, and it didn't even occur to me until recently, is, not that this is the same, but when there's a mass casualty event, you think about like a shooting at a workplace or something like that, the immediate response is to bring in trauma response, grief counseling, and to reach out to everybody and focus on well-being. Okay. Well, the workforce in many ways experienced something similar to that, at least emotionally, if not physically. And so they may be harboring some of those elements where just doing the check-in will open them up so that you get an honest and authentic opportunity to evaluate that person and their readiness for your opportunity, their culture fit for your vulnerable staff, your fragile staff, because you don't want to introduce toxicity, right? And you'll be able to relate the position in terms of meeting their needs and then meeting organizational needs in a clear and concrete way. Where, again, if you buy somebody in with that bonus, as soon as their obligation towards that bonus is expired, they might be looking for another bonus. But if you've connected them to a meaningful, in this position when you're winning, this is how the customer benefits, this is how the resident benefits, the sense of community that we can offer in multifamily that doesn't exist in a lot of opportunities employment. But we have a valuable gem to say, when you're here, you're part of a community where people find respite, peace of mind, comfort, security. And you can be an ambassador for that at our organization, even if the way you're an ambassador is by picking up the grounds, by doing door-to-door trash, and by making sure that we have a beautiful community by which our residents get to enjoy it. That is so much more important and impactful to job seekers than, when people have a little extra cash, they like to buy iPads. So that's why you want to work for Apple.
Right. No, that's great information. And you mentioned something and you say culture, which is just music to my ears because we talk about our personal company culture on a daily basis. And that I think can be a game changer, when people are looking at. And I think one of the things to remember, I know that we've been super focused on is that it's not, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's not just about, realizing the trauma within the workforce and everything, but, every person that we have, with us has their own personal story too, right? So we have to be very, very cognizant, to that as well. And I know something that I know talking, with a lot of colleagues in this industry, one of the challenges, and I mentioned earlier, some differences between, staffing, say a corporate office versus, an on-site office can look very different these days than it did, previously. And, there's been a lot of talk about how you make, flexible schedules, for the on-site teams, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Or what does that look like in as far as at the site level?
Well, where it's possible, I highly recommend doing a huddle, doing that town hall and talking to everybody about here's what we absolutely have to do. There's some things we must do with every team, every job, and then there's things we like to do, and making sure that the team understands that, and then working within that team to create flexibility. For example, with your service and maintenance team, if you've got the headcount available, maybe some of the staff would like to start at 7 a.m. so that they can leave at 3 p.m. Maybe some of the staff would like to start at 10 o'clock so that they can leave at 7 o'clock because summer hours would allow that. And just by making those accommodations, they're happier each day when they go to work, and they have more camaraderie, more teamwork. The other thing to look at is, and I mentioned this to someone else the other day, is if I were in a position of portfolio oversight, so multiple properties, and I had the resources available, I would try to staff a couple of extra individuals that would allow for some floating, if you will, so that we could do things like 4 10s instead of 8 5s, or 5 8s rather, and some scheduling opportunities to allow individuals to, quote, have a mental health day. That's the current buzzword, but just a day of relief, a day of recovery, because tensions are high, stress is high, unlike anything we've ever seen before. So any of those types of models, and I know sometimes budgets don't allow for the extra headcount. But if, selfishly, if you can utilize a third party company like a staffing firm, we'd love to help you in that way. But coming up with a team agreed, strategy there so that flex. I mean, sometimes it might just be, hey, I don't want to take an hour for lunch. I'd rather take 30 minutes and be able to get out ahead of traffic, and allowing that flexibility would be huge. And then being able to communicate those types of adaptations, again, not only to your existing team that you want to hold on to dearly and retain, but to new team members. We've adapted in the last 16 months in our organization. And right now, we used to never let anybody work from home. And right now, 2 to 3 days a week, we've got team members that are working from home. And we've noticed no difference in a negative way to performance, output, profitability. In fact, all of those metrics are up, not down. So where you can find those wins, I highly recommend you leverage resources. And a short-term cost now in terms of additional personnel for a 90-day window even can buy long-term benefit in terms of employees recovering and then being retained because they felt heard, respected, and valued.
Sorry, Tracy, I would like to just emphasize what Robert is saying. When we're talking about bonuses and how you'll do a sign-on bonus for someone and then they're gone 2 weeks later, and then that bonus was for nothing. And this idea, the things that Robert is talking about, is this idea of emotional currency, right? Like if we can't get people in the door or to stay with physical currency, this idea of emotional currency it can be really beneficial. And we on this call right now understand how challenging it can be, especially at the site level, to offer some flexibility within schedules. But I think that what Robert is suggesting can be really beneficial to some team members, right? Either hiring a couple more people, or just, creating a change in the work day, right? Instead of 9 to 6, maybe offer them 7 to 4. Just some sort of emotional currency is really valuable right now to people. It seems like. And Tracy, you can go ahead and ask the next question.
Sure. So I know, and we've talked a lot about just how hard it is to recruit people and get people to want to come back to work, in the current, state of the industry that we have. But how can, we get that applicant, we hire that person, and then they don't stick, right? So how do we avoid, Robert, just from the very beginning, hiring the wrong person for the job?
Well, again, in that interview I mentioned about doing the check-in, and once you've
Right.
done the check-in with them, then transition into be very clear with applicants about what winning in the role looks like. Okay, if you're excelling in this role, then this is what you're putting in terms of your time, in terms of you not just skills that are necessary or tasks that are repetitive, daily, weekly, monthly, but actually, you might face this challenge, this shortage, you might face this unexpected event, and handling these things is how you're winning in this position. So have a clear picture of both what goes into being successful in the role and then what the result of that is. Then be able to clearly say, by this result, you make us a better organization here locally as a team, and you make customers happier, better customers, better resident retention, a cleaner community, a nicer community, more retained resident, things like that. Be able to identify to that job seeker that this is, not a dotted line, but a straight line, a clear line to your success in this role leads to this. Then ask them in pointed language, does that sound like what you want to do? Does that type of winning sound like something you're excited about? Then listen for definitive and clear-cut commitment language from them. Not, yeah, sure, but yes, I like that. Yes, that's what was missing from my last job. Yes, I've wanted that always. I'd love to be a part of that. And I think I could do this as well. Those are great indicators of commitment, okay, of perseverance. And so, once you've done that, then the next step with that is get them aboard and throw the traditional training timetable out the window. Define for them at 30 days, this is you being excellent in that role. At 90 days, this is you being excellent in that role. At 6 months and at 18 months, can you see yourself happy and fulfilled at each one of these phases? What will you need? And at that 18-month window, do you see that creating balance, comfort, and peace of mind in your greater life at large? And listen for individuals who can speak confidently and clearly into those yeses. If they don't have a plan, if they haven't considered it, and that's very likely for somebody, again, emerging from a trauma situation. Very likely, right now I'm thinking about tomorrow. I'm not thinking about 18 months from now. If it's worthwhile, if they're what I like to call profitable on paper, they look great on paper, then you may want to invest in sitting down with them in the interview process, doing something non-traditional and mapping that out with them so that they're going to say, oh my God, not only does this job do for my career what I've wanted, but I love the way that fits into my greater life at large. Yes, sign me up and I'll be here.
I love that, Robert. And you hit on a couple really key points that stuck out with me is that, being very transparent, and rolling out the plan too. And the process may, in my mind, take a little bit longer than maybe it has in the past, right? To get that kind of emotional buy-in that Morgan was speaking to earlier. So that's some great information. You may invest a lot more time on the front end, getting the right person, but if you can get the emotional buy-in in the beginning, I think that would turn into a longer term solution for your needs. So I am going to jump to the next question, Robert. What positions, especially at the site level, are you seeing as far as the most turnover and most issues as far as open positions right now?
So I want to preface this answer by making sure that everyone understands that, of what I've observed in our sector, in our industry, some of that is relative to the fact that we at Higher Priority, I'm not doing a lot of supervisory corporate level positions, but at the site level, seeing tremendous turnover in specific positions and then in the profile of the candidate in those positions. And I'll start with the specific positions. Those individuals that have been more customer facing more often over the last 16 months, where they've had to enforce things like social distancing policies and mask mandates, and they've had to interact with residents, which has created a heightened sense of tension over that time frame. So think leasing and marketing, obviously, your positions there. Much higher turnover than those who are a little further afoot from the customer interactions. The second group, again, on the maintenance service side, there has been some turnover at your senior tech level, your EPA and maintenance supervisor level, but I've seen tremendous turnover, at relatively newer techs, and then your make-ready porter groundskeepers. If you have concierge housekeepers, high levels of turnover in those positions as well. And again, I think that what I'm observing, what I'm hearing when I interact with these candidates, because they're coming to me from jobs they've left, they weren't connected in the organization. They weren't connected to that optimal output they didn't feel a sense of, hey, by me being an excellent porter, this was a better team and a better property and happier community residents. So, you know what? I left. Same thing on the leasing side. Being really, really good at leasing and marketing, offering excellent customer service. Nobody checked in with me regularly to see how I was doing, how stressed and tense I was. And so I didn't get a sense that my health, well-being, and kind of overall care and concern was valued by the organization. What I heard repeatedly was, make sure people are complying with our safety protocols, make sure the customer, the resident, is happy, and somewhat be thankful you have a job. Those individuals absorb that high turnover. A category of individuals that have turned over a lot lately are these newer individuals. They've been on the job for less than a year. And because of how they might have been summarily dismissed either through furlough or layoff a year ago, these are the individuals that have no qualms about a no notice exit. Mm-hmm. It was done to them. They don't see anything wrong with doing it now. That's what I'm observing. And not only in our industry, but across the board.
Well, that was actually a perfect lead into my next question, because, and I know you've already touched a little bit on this, on people leaving, but there does seem to be, this trend of a mass exodus, leaving companies with no notice at all, just walking off jobs. We're finding, keys. I've talked to a lot of people within the industry where they're literally finding keys in the maintenance shop where maintenance techs have walked off the job. And even leaving, our industry for, completely different, companies, different industries. You've already touched on seeing it as a trend in the multifamily. I mean, can you speak to that piece of it a little bit more?
Absolutely. So it's my humble opinion that everybody's security, real and ethereal, if you will, was upended with this pandemic a year and a half ago. And because of that, job security is no longer an authentic term. And so therefore, if that's not an asset of me showing up to this place every single day, it's got to be replaced by something. Because I'm not concerned about job security. I was furloughed, I was laid off, and therefore I feel no obligation, no debt, no gratitude to giving you notice or whatever the case may be, to how that might affect others if I just leave keys in a drawer. And so what we have to do, in my opinion, is we replace the idea of job security, which is no longer authentic. We replace it with an idea of meaningful connection. And that is that your presence, your work, your very who you are is meaningfully connected to the product, to the service we offer, again, in our industry, to the community residents that live here. the elderly, the married, the single, the child alike, your presence is meaningful to them. And if you were to not value that or not respect that, it would have a negative, a harmful impact to them. That's going to be more effective if we can communicate that, if we can make sure that others understand that and agree to that. Then that's where you're going to have employees that if there is turnover, it is of the traditional model. Let me give you notice. Let me tell you why I'm leaving, and I'm going to do it in a what we might used to term professional way. But without that, we can no longer, what I would call, we can no longer hide behind the idea of job security. You have job security here, so therefore you at least owe us a professional exit. And I think that's why you see the Burger King where the entire team quit. They were not meaningfully connected to what they were doing there. And they felt their well-being, their health, their whatever wasn't valued. They didn't mind shutting it down and saying, hey, that's your problem, not ours.
Yeah, I keep hearing a consistent trend in what you're saying is really, it's all about, culture and emotionally connecting them, to their jobs, making it, meaningful and purposeful, and how important they are. I know that, just out of natural, distancing and not wanting to, there has been a disconnect, I think, more with associates than there ever has been, or at least, I've seen that as well. So you bring up some great points. I did see that Burger King sign where everybody just kind of walked out. So it's definitely something that we want to avoid. So, given the volatility that we have right now, within this, staffing issue and recruiting the right people and mass exodus and all the things that we've already talked about, Robert, and some of the great points that you've brought up, should we be increasing, as far as kind of management companies, the number of reviews that we're doing with associates, increasing one-on-one meetings, those types of things, to continue that kind of emotional connection with them, to keep these associates on longer?
Absolutely. You should, if you're empowered to do so, throw out the old model of quarterly review, semi-annual, annual review, and as is possible, compress the timeline of check-ins, of again, reviews, but also of just check-ins of how's it going? Is what you expected happening? What are some unexpected positives that you've experienced so far or in the last period that you would like repeated, replicated to experience more often? What are some unforeseen, negatives that you need help with and that we need to address? And so I would argue that in a meaningful way, you want to be checking in weekly, if not daily. And you want to do a multifaceted approach. It should be some one-on-one. It should be some town hall. There should be an opportunity for anonymity in terms of, communicating maybe up to corporate about things. It should be, full scope, if you will, kind of that old idea of the 360-degree review. It should be up, down, left, right, all around, so that you can hopefully stay intimately connected with potential vulnerabilities in your workforce and to be able to react sooner rather than later. And I know that can be taxing on an organization, but the commitment is going to yield immeasurable result. There is value. There is unimaginable value in your experienced long-term personnel that leave, and that value is not easily recouped with new hires. So, make the investment. And if you can't do it with everybody, I highly recommend, and this may sound callous, but I highly recommend you identify who you must retain, who you'd be willing to lose if it meant keeping others. And that's from just a resource availability, time resources, money resources, whatever. That's making the most of what you have. But you want to have a plan. And that plan shouldn't look like it looked in terms of employee retention in 2018. You want to have a plan now that invest in, if it can't be everybody, then those key someones. Maybe a year ago you called them essential, and really being in tune with them, like I said, on a weekly basis, not a quarterly basis.
Yeah, it reminds me, Robert, and you're so right. And a lot of this, I think we should have been doing all along, quite frankly. But I think it's more heightened now, right? Because we are having some of the struggles. I do think, it reminds me of kind of the 80-20 rule that we hear about all the time. I mean, if we've got some great associates that, you know, are producing 80% of the work, we need to be putting in our time on and efforts and really kind of retaining those associates. And it's a great lead in kind of to, you know, kind of falling into the final question that we have at today is, you know, talking about the toxic work environment, right? I mean, we know we have the great associates, and then we may have some associates that maybe don't fall into that category, but we need associates so bad. Sometimes it's hard to let go, right? But toxic work environments is a very, very real thing. So what does that look like, you know, from your perspective, and what can we do, you know, better if we do feel like we have one?
Well, you know, I'll start with if you identify some toxicity, whether it be an individual or even a process, you know, right? A holdover process that was kind of the standard prior to what we've all gone through. You need to acknowledge it immediately. You can't let it persist, and then you need to address it, and you need to eliminate it, because if you leave it unattended, even slightly, what happens is your top, what I call your top 20, your top performers, and especially now because the options are available, they flee toxicity. They do. So if there's a sense of a disrespectful worker, you know, whether it be a supervisor or even a peer, if there's an individual who, regardless of their impact on others, they're routinely, I don't know, absent, or you know, they leave early, they come in late, they don't communicate with the team, just aberrant behaviors to what is accepted. You know, obviously the first step is address it, communicate, find out if there's some underlying issues that can be addressed so that they'll be recovered. If they can't be recovered, then be fiercely loyal to your top performers and make the tough decision. And even if your top performers have to operate a person down for a short period of time, that is a far better scenario than an organization that is left with only toxic employees, because top performers have fled. And a funny thing about, and I don't mean haha, but peculiar, a funny thing about toxic employees is they embrace, poor performers embrace toxic environments. They identify that it provides cover and excuses and explanations for them to kind of say, well, it's not me, it's the situation, or it's this, or it's that. Whereas poor performers, one thing that is somewhat universal about them is they operate in a no excuse culture, which is the same as a no explanation culture. They get it done. They want those around them to get it done, and they don't tolerate anything else. And so, you know, again, be looking not only at the real results of your organization, for example, occupancy rates, rental income, renewal rates, things like that, but get in there with your teams and understand, you know, are we getting equitable contribution from every member of the team, or do we have team members that are making up for others in a way that, while short term we're okay, long term it's going to be cancerous and detrimental? And again, if you identify it, it isn't like, okay, yeah, I'm aware of that, we'll do something, but right now it's a tough hiring environment, so we don't want to lose it. No, it's, we're going to identify it, we're going to address it immediately, and we're willing to be a person down for a short period of time to make sure we have the right person on our team in every position.
No, Robert, that's great information, and I completely agree. I mean, we're obviously super focused on all, you know, the statistical information, financials, and all of that. But for all of us, and I'm hoping the viewers would agree with this, is that, you know, people are everything, right? And if we don't have the right people and, you know, lower our turnover and all of that, especially in this environment that we're in right now, all that other stuff, you know, it comes with the right people first, right? So. I know, Robert, thank you so much for your time, your level of expertise. You've given us so much great information to kind of think through, and hopefully the viewers got, I'm sure they did get as much great information as I personally, you know, received. I know that, you know, I'm not sure if there's any other questions, Morgan. I'll turn it over to you, but I just wanted to personally thank you, Robert, for your time today. I appreciate it. It was great, you know, great, interesting information. Thank you.
Well, I was happy to do it. I was glad to nerd out for a good 40 minutes.
I personally am feeling really motivated and inspired after this session. I hope everyone on the call today is as well. And I hope that you guys you learned a lot, because I personally learned so much. So thank you very much to Robert with Higher Priority for providing us with such great information. And thank you, Tracy, for hosting. Join us next time, Wednesday, August 18th, when we will talk to HAA's Andy Tees and Matilda Luna about some legislative issues and the top questions apartment managers ask us about the TAA lease. Until then, make it a great day. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.